Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Kris. This is because I wanted to do this one. I am finishing volume 3 of Benjamin Harrison, A President at the Crossroads. He lived in Indianapolis. His home is still there. You can tour it. It's a nice big home. And he's buried. It's in Indianapolis. It's several miles away. Big actual cemetery instead of, a lot of them were buried on property. But I wanted to do this because I'm finishing volume 3. So this is just strictly a me choice. This will be 3 20-minute videos. Before we get started, click that thumbs up. Sorry, I was reading this. The Hoover presidency in 1 hour. Subscribe to the channel. I've never done this channel before. What is happening? No, I can't. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and get into it. Let's go.
As President of the United States, I was present at the first Pan-American Congress in Washington, D.C. Believe that with God's help, our two countries shall continue to live side by side in peace and prosperity. Benjamin Harrison.
The Voice, the first preserved recording of the man in the White House. The time, like the recording, a curious mix of 2 eras, of the way things were once done and the way they would be done from now on. The speaker, a man with a foot in both worlds. It was the last of the Gilded Age, a time of extremes of wealth and poverty, backed by the smoke-filled room. But the plains would soon ring out with the voice of the prairie populist, and the seas would bend before surging American naval power. It was reigning, too, the day his grandfather took the same oath, one that would make Benjamin Harrison the 23rd President of the United States. His rival, the ousted and no longer incumbent Grover Cleveland, politely held an umbrella over his head as Benjamin Harrison prepared to give his inaugural address. "I do not," Harrison said, "mistrust the future."
Harrison is very much aware of these times that are changing, that are going to lead to a very different America.
The president who starts to bring America, perhaps slowly, but onto the world stage is a power that is going to be extending.
Politics was, in some ways, it was a contact sport.
It's about winning, winning, winning.
Does he not understand how many men came so close to the penitentiary to get him elected?
He was not a glad-hander.
One senator said it was like talking to a hitching post.
I think that is one of the things about Harrison that continues to make him a mystery to most.
But on the inside, there's a fire that burns.
And he would take both fists and make his points like this.
Violence in the Reconstruction South means murder.
Harrison made a vow that he would not purchase the presidency by a compact of silence on the voting rights issue.
Harrison certainly pushed it further than it had ever gone before.
In his refusal to sort of simply cave to party bosses, I think he struck a blow for independence of the executive.
You can make enemies.
And it's just extraordinary when you look at his record and his emphasis on doing what was right in the right way, even at significant personal cost.
I think it is time to rethink the place of Benjamin Harrison in the evolution of the presidency.
Just completely unrelated, on the book that I was reading, well, it's 3 volumes. He was a general in the Civil War, and he was leading. So he got into the Civil War. They'll probably discuss it, but he was good at giving speeches and stuff like that. Lawyer, very charismatic. And so they had asked him to start recruiting in around Indiana. And he was recruiting people to send him off to war. And he hated himself for that. So he said, if you want me to continue to recruit, then I'm going to recruit men and I'm going to lead them into battle. And they were like, no. And he goes, I won't recruit for you. And they were like, oh, really, man? He's like, yeah, I can't allow these men to go fight. And here I am trying to lure more people in. I won't do that. So they finally said, okay. But anyways, that was just kind of the character of him. But anyways, he's leading troops, and they kept thinking, we're going to run into Confederates, right? It's going to be around this. They were following. Were they following a river? There was a river nearby, and they were walking to get to it, and then they were going to follow that river. And they were sure that the Confederates were near that river. They're walking. They get to this area. No Confederates. They're looking around, and they're like, okay, everyone quick, fill your canteens and drink. Drink as much water as you can. And I don't remember the name of the creek. It was a funny name. But anyways, they drink they fill their canteens, they're drinking water. And I want to say maybe even some of the guys were like splashing water on their face and on their neck. They go walking off. And as they're walking, following this river, they get probably about, I think he said 100 yards. They start smelling something, and they realize they come across this bend, and there's like dead horses and pigs and goats and sheep that have been slaughtered in this water. And the water was running down, and they were at the down end of it, so they had been drinking all this slaughtered water, basically. And he made a comment to a it wasn't his wife. He had a cousin that he spoke to a lot. Might have been the cousin. And he said, we got our fill on, how did he phrase it? We got our fill on farm animal soup. And he goes, we waited a few days and no one got sick, so we must be okay. And then he went right back into it. I was like, ugh, oh, it's got to be terrible. Didn't anyone notice a taste? Like,
A President at the Crossroads is made possible through a generous grant from the Indiana Office of Tourism Development.
North Bend, Ohio, sometime after 1833. Benjamin Harrison was born in this place in that year. A farmer's son schooled in a log cabin. But today, it's the family orchard that will teach him a lesson that will shape all the days of his life.
I remember pressing through an alder thicket. I saw sitting in the midst a colored man with the frightened look of a fugitive, attempting to satisfy his hunger with some walnuts. He noticed my approach with a fierce, startled look to see whether I was likely to betray him. I was frightened myself and left him in some trepidation. But I kept his secret. This is Christmas Eve.
Some 2 decades later, the boy is now a man, 500 miles away from...
That's the cover of the first volume. That's the legit, that's the cover of it. It's pretty interesting.
From his home and his family.
And the dear little ones are nestling their little heads on the pillow, filled with high expectations of what Santa Claus will bring them. And Papa is not there.
He was now in the thick of the Atlanta campaign, designed by the armies of the North to strike a death blow to the Civil War that has pit brother against brother, and to bring freedom to slaves like the one whose secret he once held so close. That he was there at all was unexpected. Benjamin Harrison was now living in Indianapolis and had become a protege of the state's governor, Oliver P. Morton, a man who likes to keep his friends close. Close, too, is Morton with President Abraham Lincoln, and the president has called for more troops. When his state's response proves lukewarm, Morton decides to put some heat to it. He asks Harrison to help recruit volunteers, but cautions that as Indiana court reporter, he is too valuable to go himself. It is not likely that he will. Harrison and his wife Caroline are still reeling from the death of a baby girl, their third child. Torn between family and duty, he makes a decision.
Harrison's feeling is, I can't recruit other soldiers or other men to go serve in the field without going myself.
I'm proud to be the wife of Benjamin Harrison, the lawyer. I shall be prouder still to be the wife of Harrison, the soldier. Don't worry about me. I can take care of myself and the children. Caroline Harrison.
For over a year, an inexperienced Colonel Harrison and his equally inexperienced 70th Indiana Regiment roam the Kentucky countryside, protecting rail lines. At night, Harrison studies tactics. By day, he drills his volunteers. Many of them chafe under his strict discipline. They nickname the 5'6" Harrison Little Ben.
He couldn't dominate people by his physical presence, but he did have the power of his office. He was the leader of his regiment, and he never forgot that, and he never compromised on that.
Still, there are times when Harrison feels completely isolated.
General Payne gave a party, though frequently urged to dance, especially by a very buxom and pretty wife of one of our surgeons. I persistently declined. I have lost all faculty of making myself agreeable in general society.
When war finally comes to the 70th Indiana, they're ready. At Resaca, Georgia, Harrison and his men capture a battery of 4 cannon, fighting through devastating sniper fire, which is, as Harrison later writes, provokingly accurate.
For an hour and a half, the enemy's shells and grapes fell like hail. 2 of my men had their heads torn off, close down to the shoulder.
He's very open with her throughout the letters, not only about what they're doing, but also how he feels that what his duty is and how God has influenced his participation in the war. Sometimes all of that comes within the same letter.
There were a couple times where he wrote a letter basically saying, I don't think I'm going to make it. You know, love you, love to Dad, and da-da-da-da. And he would send it. I mean, just imagine getting that letter and you're kind of like, oh no. And then a letter would follow up. No, we made it. It was fine. Like he did not hold back. He just shared with that. That's with his wife.
Surgeons got separated from us. I stripped my arms to dress the men's wounds myself. I pulled out of one poor fellow's arm a splinter 5 inches long and as thick as my 3 fingers.
In one occasion, he writes the farewell letter, just in case something happens, here's my brief note, and at the bottom of the page, well, okay, so what happened yesterday was, so he manages to get through.
At Peachtree Creek, Harrison acts on his own to close a gap in the Union lines.
Harrison put his spurs to his horse and dashed up the hill in front of his brigade. They, cheering, followed rapidly up the hill. L.T. Miller.
By God, Harrison, I'll make you a brigadier general for this fight. General Fighting Joe Hooker.
So on January 23, 1865, President Lincoln nominates Harrison for the rank of brigadier general.
Joe Hooker, nicknamed Fighting Joe Hooker. I've said this in another video about him, but during the Civil War, his men used to get paid, and then they would drink, and there were women, and this was pretty common, but there were women that would follow the men, because when they got paid, they would trade money for sex. And the women who followed his group started getting the name Hooker's Gals. And they were known as, that's Hooker's Gals. Yeah, they're known as the women who get paid for sex. And then later on, as time went by, it was shortened to Hooker or Hookers. And now, I don't know, change it to prostitutes. But yeah, that was the creation of women who get paid for sex started because of him, because of his last name, and it got tagged into it. There you go.
4 months later, Lincoln is felled by an assassin's bullet.
You know, Carrie, that I am pretty ugly sometimes, and have often made you unhappy, for all of which I am very penitent. But when the Civil War is over, I think we shall live very lovingly together, provided you don't keep too many canaries, mockingbirds, and cats. With a heart immensely full of love for you, my dear chosen one, your husband.
Born Caroline Lavinia Scott, she was proof that opposites attract. When he was 15, Benjamin left North Bend to enroll at Farmers College in Cincinnati. It was there that he met John W. Scott, a professor, and his daughter, the one with the dancing brown eyes.
And he did find reasons to go to Professor Scott's home on a frequent basis, and really took a shine to this young woman who was just the opposite of him in personality.
When John Scott decided to move back to Oxford and take his daughter with him, Benjamin transferred to Miami University, which just happened to also be in Oxford. There, he studied ethics and literature and pledged Phi Delta Theta fraternity as one of its earliest members. But his interest soon focused on law and religion. With either career, the young Harrison reasoned one could serve mankind well. After all, a devout Presbyterian faith devoted to service had been a cornerstone of his life since childhood.
His mother was very, very influential in teaching him a religious faith. His mother died when he was in college. This was a real blow to young Ben Harrison, and it was in college that he made his commitment to Christ.
When he was courting his wife, all his college friends called him the pious moonlight dude.
Apparently, piety and passion did mix, for the dude had won Caroline's heart. Yet Harrison was concerned. He felt that her many duties at the school were taking a toll on her fragile health. His solution? Ben proposed.
And he said, you know, we've really got to do this, and because I'm going to save you.
My present design is to migrate to Chicago in the spring, where I will be able to obtain immediate admission to the bar. An energetic and patient pursuit of my profession will ensure success. In a word, I pledge my best efforts for her happiness.
Benjamin, if you conclude to settle in Indianapolis, you may very soon get into a good practice. Most of the members of the bar here are moral, and some of them pious men, but none of them are very talented. Your cousin, William Sheets.
Of such casual remarks are weighty decisions made. With her father presiding, Carrie and Ben tied the knot. They shipped everything they owned in a single box for 91 cents and relocated to the Hoosier capital. Both were just 20 years old. Harrison's legal career, though, while energetic as promised, required more patience than expected.
Yeah, he is struggling. He was allowed to assist the county prosecutor in a burglary case, and he got the chance to give the summary argument.
He had written out an elaborate summation that he was going to make to the jury, but poor lighting in the courtroom meant that he couldn't actually see what he had written.
Of such serendipitous moments are careers also made, for Harrison won the case. From then on, he would speak from the heart and the head, but not a written text.
Yeah, on that case in particular, because it was so dark, he couldn't read what he had written. So he had to wing it, going by memory off of what he remembered he had wrote down. But yeah, he had to wing it. And then he decided, I'm never going to be in that situation again, so I'm just going to prepare myself like he was giving a speech. It's pretty creative.
In September 1868, a young boy herding cows along the White River spotted a man and a woman resting by a fire along the water's edge. Turns out they weren't river gazing at all.
His head was half blown off by a shotgun. His wife's body was burned from the waist down, probably from the flash from the pistol shot she took to the head. These were outwardly respectable middle-class people. They weren't the kind of people who were supposed to end up dead.
As the funeral procession passed, a grocer's wife stood in curious observance. When asked why, Nancy Clem replied, no reason. She didn't know them. But she did know them, for Jacob and Nancy Jane Young were her partners in a loan sharking scheme. She also knew the man who was now one of the nation's up-and-coming attorneys and who would prosecute her for their murder. Turns out he was her neighbor, Benjamin Harrison. The trial was a national sensation. Some 250 witnesses. Harrison shreds alibi after alibi. He turns his emotional pleas on and off at will, saving his most impassioned speech to denounce Nancy Clem persuading her 15-year-old niece to commit perjury.
And he said, I would rather walk behind my child's coffin than have my child's eternal soul threatened by presenting these awful lies.
Nancy Clem was convicted, but she appealed, and appealed, and appealed again. She escaped the gallows, but served 4 years on a perjury conviction. But for Benjamin Harrison, his skills as a cool tactician had been affirmed, and he would need that cool to deal with personal tragedy. In 1878, Harrison's father died in his sleep. In the Gilded Age, grave robbing and cadaver dissecting often went hand in hand, so the family built a secure brick vault and hired a watchman. But on the day of the funeral, it was discovered that an adjoining plot had been disturbed. An investigation led Harrison's brother John to the Ohio Medical College, and there he discovered a hooded body hanging from a rope beneath a trap door. To his astonishment, when the hood came off, it's father! Upon hearing the news, it was noted that this was possibly the only time Benjamin Harrison uttered a profanity.
Oh, what's the matter with Harrison? He's all right.
And he went to Cincinnati while his brother was doing the searching. And I got to put you down, sweet pea. I got to lift you up. Okay, there you go. I got to get that off you. So the brother was around this like back area, and there was like a sheet and stuff like that, and there was a couple police officers there. And he's pulling up the body, and the police are like, yeah, there's a body. Pulls it up. One of the cops runs over. No. Grabs the rope and says, you can identify the guy. So you go around and identify him. So he went around, and his father had been shaven clean because he died with a beard. He had been shaved clean, was completely nude, minus a little thing on his head. And so he wired Cincinnati because they were around Cleveland, I believe. No. Anyways, he wired Cincinnati, and Benjamin Harrison, being a lawyer, was just like, okay. Went back and went after the school where the body was found, and they were like, well, we buy them, but we don't encourage it. And he was like, well, it's a crime. And I want to say he sued that school almost out of existence.
There can be no comparison, he's all right. Ben's a man who bravely went for his native...
It is 1888, and the man who once was one of the country's premier attorneys is now its preeminent Republican, heading his party's ticket for president. Benjamin Harrison's nomination is no surprise, but it is a compromise. The nominee 4 years earlier, and the presumptive favorite, James G. Blaine, had withdrawn his name from consideration. Or had he?
You really can't talk about Harrison without talking about James G. Blaine. James G. Blaine was the dominant political figure in the Republican Party of that era. He wanted desperately to be President of the United States.
Also, always scheming. And so you could never tell what his motivation was.
Blaine himself, in his heart of hearts, really wanted the convention to come to him. Blaine's men said, let's give our votes to X candidate for a while and show that he's not strong enough to win. And then let's give our votes to Y candidate for a while and show that he's not strong enough. And then we'll have...
By the way, Blaine wasn't even in the country when this was happening. He kept saying he had no interest in it, but deep down inside, he wanted the party to do all this and realized that he had to be the savior. But he kept getting... He lost. Like, he lost in '84 against Cleveland. And he just wasn't as strong as... He was maybe the strongest in the party, but he just wasn't as strong. And they were looking at it like, well, he's already lost to Cleveland, so let's try someone new.
Oh my gosh, a deadlocked convention. Who can help us break this deadlock? None other than James G. Blaine. Well, the first person they chose for that dubious honor of this strategy was Benjamin Harrison.
This was Harrison's third foray into elected office. In many ways, his doing so was inevitable.
Benjamin Harrison comes from a distinguished American political family. His great-grandfather, Benjamin Harrison, same name, was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, a governor of Virginia. His grandfather was William Henry Harrison.
William Henry Harrison was a battlefield legend. He had served his country with valor in the War of 1812. As Indiana Territorial Governor, he removed the Native American enclave of Prophetstown and pursued its charismatic founder, Tecumseh, into Canada to take away both his dreams of a united Indian Confederacy and his life. As old Tippecanoe, he parlayed that military fame to become the 9th President of the United States. But his time in office was short-lived. Washington, D.C. dumped its sewage in a marsh just blocks from its water supply. William Henry Harrison died of sepsis just 1 month into his term. Benjamin Harrison was only 7 years old at the time, but comparisons to his grandfather would follow him the rest of his political life.
Harrison was really reluctant to piggyback on his grandfather's success and said, you know, I'm not the grandson of anyone.
But if Harrison was distancing himself from his lineage, he could not escape his destiny. His old ally, now Senator Oliver P. Morton, had grown to see his increasing popularity as a threat.
Bunch of the old-timers for William Henry Harrison, because he ran with John Tyler, and the slogan was Tippecanoe and Tyler too, which Tippecanoe is the Battle of Tippecanoe was where was that? That wasn't Tecumseh. Was that Tecumseh? No, Tecumseh I think was Horseshoe Bend. Anyways, Tippecanoe was, I don't remember now. Horseshoe Bend might have been. Anyways, doesn't matter right now. But a lot of those people who came out and supported William Henry Harrison came out and supported Benjamin Harrison when he was going. And his father, Benjamin Harrison's father, was in politics. He just never had any interest in presidency or anything like that. And he was trying to convince Benjamin Harrison, look, if you want to get into this, understand what it will take. This isn't going to be just some simple, you know, you're in it and then you leave and then you can come back in and you leave and you come, like, you enter, you're in it. You're in it for life until you're not wanted.
And Harrison's political career was stalled. Then fate stepped in the form of the 1876 Republican nominee for governor. Godliff Orth had stepped down. A newspaper accused Orth of shaking down investors in Venezuelan bonds while he was in Congress, and Harrison was asked to replace him. he is introduced as Young Tip.
Republican parades featured veterans of Tippecanoe, veterans of his grandfathers who had voted for his grandfather. But the
Going to go ahead and end it there. Figure it'd be about 19 and a half minutes per video. Okay, well, this is part one. Yeah, he's an interesting guy. It's I'm on volume 3, which was it's pretty much the start of his presidency itself. It's actually the shortest of all the books. It's only like 280 pages. The other ones were like 330, and I want to say maybe 310. But I'm just trying to finish them. All right, well, we're going to end that one here. We'll be back with part 2. Until then, have a good day, have a good night.